Right, welcome back to Delboy's Garage. Been off the net for a week or so, just basically working, head down, pedal, you know what it's like. And I've got some time today to get into the Hayabusa prep. Now the first job I wanted to do, this is something I've been promising for a little while, is to get into the coolant. Now I always look for a video on the net. Before I make one on a given subject, I always look to see if it's there, and I looked up this sports bike engine coolant. There's just loads of them. But there's one particular thing that nobody really bothers to show. It's how to refill it properly so that there's no air bubbles in it. There's a couple of procedures. So first of all, we're going to drain out the old coolant, a little bit of a warning on coolant and what it's all about, and then we'll show where we go from there. So there you go, stick around, stay tuned. Welcome back. Right, tools for the job. First thing you need, obviously, these videos about how to and stuff. I'm going to try and make it a bit more quick fire because you're all intelligent people, and most of you, if you're going to attack a job on your bike, you've clearly obviously got some tools and you've obviously got a brain in your head, so I'm not going to need to keep explaining this stuff in a remedial way. But basic kit list for this job: you want something to get your Jubilee clips undone with, a funnel, some coolant, obviously, and a cat litter tray. Now, go around the first time I've done this in the past, I've gone using like a little bowl just to put the coolant in, and then you realise quickly there's about 3 litres of coolant in it, and you've got a 2.5 litre bowl, which is it's quite spectacular, and you only do it once. So a cat litter tray, that holds about 8 litres of fluid, and it costs pennies. That's pennies as in money, not pennies as in holding the camera, right? So we'll come back to the funnel in a minute. Simple. First thing, drain it out. Now, the coolant system is a radiator, the plumbing that goes between the radiator and the engine, and what's inside the engine as well. We need to drain it all down and get it out before we can start flushing it. So normally you take the radiator cap off and then take the pipe out. But obviously think about the principles of vacuum. If you leave the radiator cap on, take the hose off the bottom, not a lot comes out, if anything at all, because it's vacuum's holding it in. You'll get a bit out, but you won't get it bursting out all over the floor, splashing everywhere. It's the same with your oil. If you're doing an oil change, a simple task, but it can go wrong. And obviously, just to keep your garage reasonably tidy, it pays to just leave it done up at the top. Same as your oil. Don't take the oil cap off, take the drain plug out first, and if you take it, you let the air in the top, same as this. We're going to just take the hose off first, and there's our old coolant there. And most of it's coming out the engine. Reach around and just come in this side, man. There's a radiator cap here on any sports bike. This is pretty generic on all sports bikes, this. Take your radiator cap off after. Alright, put that back on the garage. And that's it, really. Believe it or not, there is almost 3 litres of coolant in there. A couple of things, they don't get this stuff on your hands, really only, not because it's corrosive, but because you tend to do this and that, and obviously there is a danger because this stuff's pretty poisonous. Not like acid, it's not corrosive like I said, but it is toxic, so don't get it, don't ingest it. If you get any in your eyes, wash it out. It's pretty nasty stuff. And another quick thing, this is extremely important. Coolant is very poisonous, as I've just said. Don't put it in the drain, for God's sake. You know, do I even have to say it? It's a no-brainer, isn't it? The water that goes in the drain ends up back in the drinking system. It just goes through the sewers, it gets purified, it comes back out your tap. So you really don't want to put coolant in it. You actually should dispose of it properly, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this stuff here. I'm going to use a funnel, and when I've tipped in the new stuff eventually, which I'll do in a bit, then we're going to put the coolant in the bottles, seal it up, and with the old oil from the oil change, it's going up to the recycling plant to be got rid of. And oddly enough, that went on my hands then, and I can already feel, you know what it's like, you feel a slight, you can feel it, slight tingle on your hands. It definitely is pretty nasty stuff. So I'm going to rinse my hands off, and I'll show you next. Right, okay, just going to pop the pipe back on, just so you didn't see this. This is the water pump. Now there is a drain bleed hole, like a little drain hole under there on the pump. So before anybody writes, oh there's a drain hole, there is, but I want to get the fluid out the radiator. And you're not going to do that all through the drain hole. So I've took the pipe off. Now I'm going to move the bike outside now to flush it. So I'm just going to poke the pipe back on. Keep that out of the way. Alright, so let's put the bike outside. Alright, now what I'm going to do is slowly fill the system up with water. Now I wouldn't suggest, obviously don't run your bike on tap water, because the process of heating and cooling on tap water will bring out the scale in the water, and you'll scale up your system. It's right firing up a kettle, as you can descale it. You can't descale an engine, and aluminium furs up worse than you inside a big kettle. So we're just filling it up now with fresh water while the hose is on, and then I'm going to drain that into the tray, because there's still coolant in this. And while it's done up and everything's done up, I'm just going to rinse it through. So here we go, we're nearly full. There you go. What we're going to do now is just running it round about 60 seconds, just to run that water around the system through the pump and dilute any last coolant out of it. Just put the old coolant in there for now. Put this underneath. And literally just pull the hose back off. And you can see there's still coolant in that. And you might want to do this about 3 or 4 times if you've got a bike that's not had a coolant change for a few years. As you can still see from the water there, there's still plenty of coolant in there. So we'll do another one. And again. Just again, you can flush it as many times as you want. I flush it until the water's running clear, completely clear. Okay, here we go again. Just pull the pipe back off. And there we are, that's running a lot clearer now out the bottom of the pump. Okay, and finally, I'm actually going to drain it through, and this is just putting the hose in the top and letting it come out the bottom. And all this is doing is making sure there's absolutely no old coolant left in it. It ensures that if the 2 coolants that you've used, the old one and the new one, if they're incompatible, there's not going to be any contamination between the two. Bikes like this do a lot of work and the engines get very hot, so a properly set up coolant system is pretty important. We did boil this, Penny remembers, when we were at Brightona, and when we got home I put about 1 litre of water in it. It didn't lose 1 litre, it lost about a pint, half a litre at the most. I put a whole litre in it and it was still low, so I think there was a cavitation, and I'll explain all about that in a minute. Alright, and that's done. Need a wee now. Finally, just tip the bike over as much as you dare, drain out as much as you can, let it clear right through. There we go. That's it. Now pop that hose back on, back in the garage. Okay, now it's at this point that Mr. Haynes says you should seal the system up and work it up to working temperature, run the engine till it gets right up to temperature and drain out that with tap water in it. And I completely disagree with that. Not everything in your Haynes manual is correct, it really isn't. I absolutely disagree, and I disagree on simple logical grounds. Tap water, unless you live in a totally rural area and your water comes out of a well or a lake, honestly, domestic street tap water is full of limescale, and if you heat it up, you release that limescale into the system. Just boil your kettle a few times, you'll soon see what I mean. So I would never do that. I put the cold water in, as you were done, drain the coolant out, fill it up with tap water, drain it out, fill it up again, drain it out. I did it 4 times in the end, didn't tape it all, and then run clean water through it. To me, that's good enough. That is good enough. It's running out completely clear. To pressurise the system, which is what the Haynes manual says, I believe is incorrect, because that water is then red hot inside the engine, and that's the wrong way to go, because you'll fur up your motor. So in this case, I'm just going to put it in cold. I've cleaned it through with cold water. You do what you want to do. If you want to follow the Haynes manual, again, as I've always said, you do what you want to do. But this is how we're going to fill it up. So I'll show you. On your water pump here, this is the exit, or this is the water pump unit there. This is the inlet hose. Now, outlet hose. There's a little peg there on the side of that, and that's where your hose goes up to. So just make sure when your hose goes on, it goes right up to that peg, no further than that peg, because it doesn't need to. And then put your clip in place, tighten out. Ain't hard, is it? Even I can do that.
Even I could do that.
You could. Now don't lean on it, because remember you're just squeezing rubber against the metal. What you don't want is a big muffin top of this rubber sticking out, because you will split it, and they do get hot. Just do them up finger tight like that. Doesn't need any more than that. It's only a little tiny clip as well. Okay, let's fill it up. Alright, as you can see I can't get in it. So this is just a little plumbing union. It makes it a little easier to get in. And I use this with oil fillers as well. So this is, again, just use what you have. Just take that round. That's it. Go in there now. Now all to do is fill this up. The first one, we'll just whirly boot straight in. Now pour it in slow, because if you pour it in fast, you whack it in fast, it will take bubbles of air down with it. So just trickle it in. It's quite therapeutic, just a tiny little drizzle, just let it drizzle in gently. You're not going to drain this out, obviously this is going in now, this is your coolant. So just take your time, let it trickle in under its own pace. And hopefully you should have an air-free system. Bleeding your coolant system is important. The more you can get into it, the less air in it, the better the cooling system will work when the summer comes. That's the first one. Now if you have to top up and you haven't got any coolant, just another good point is you can use distilled water, you know, the battery stuff, when batteries weren't sealed back in the old days, or you can get it from a dehumidifier. If you have a dehumidifier in your house, which in damp foggy England we do have, the water that comes out of the dehumidifier, that's distilled water, because it's literally it's come from vapour, and we use it in the iron and so on, and it doesn't flow up the iron, so you can put that water in just to top up. This really does take a long time to go in. It's bubbling up to the top of the neck now. Alright, just popped it on the side stand now, because that then puts the filler neck uppermost, and try and feed in the last bit. Because the system's full of little cavities and spaces that will get air bubbles in and airlocks. So when you see the book, and the book says just refill with coolant, it never tells you how long-winded that is and how detailed it is. Just messing about, just squeeze the pipes, squeeze the hoses gently. Now it looks like we might be there. We're up to the neck. Okay, now just looking in there, pen. We're up to the base of the neck now. Okay, so what I'm going to do at this point, around this side, I've got the rubber bung out of the expansion bottle, so that air can get out of there. I'm going to squeeze the hose at the bottom. And what I'm going to do now, just very quickly, just going to spin it over on the side stand. Just that is all it takes, because that's now run the pump for a couple of seconds, and there will be a big gap in the top now. Not that big, but there is a little gap there. Alright, let's poke the back end out in the street. Just want to run the bike now for about 3 minutes, just to warm that through. But if you come round, do it without the cap on. Now, if the cap's not on, it allows air to bubble out. So as the water gravitates, finds all the little holes in the cooling system, it will gradually smooth out, and that water level will drop. Just tip the bike from side to side as well. Now it doesn't do a lot for the engine, but what that's doing is in the radiator, it's just sloshing the water back and forth so it settles down in the matrix and gives you an absolutely air-free system. Alright, now she's been running now for about 3 minutes. It's getting nice and warm. Keeping an eye on the temperature gauge. When that just starts to lift, you just start to get heat into the water. Just give it 2 or 3 blips. About 3,000 or 4,000 revs, so that it just gives that water pump a really good spin. And flick it off, that's it. Now, at this point, probably still got about a pint of coolant to go in. Come around the side where this was. Look in the radiator, which was up to the neck, it's completely gone. So what coolant was there is gone. So when the books tell you just add coolant, there is more to it. Not a lot more, not sophistication or anything, it's not clever, it's just time consuming. That's the end of 2 litres gone in. Let's get the third and final one. When it says in the book, in your Suzuki manual, 2.8 litres of coolant or whatever it is, use that as a guide. If you've only put 2 in and it's up to the neck, you can tell that the bike takes more. And as you've drained it all out completely, as we did, that's a good indicator that you need to put more in. You need to work on a way of putting more in. And often it's just air bubbles. So that was up to the neck just now. And let's see what else, or how much more we can get in. And it's up to the neck again and just bubbling. So now round to the expansion bottle. Now on this side, as with most Jap sports bikes, you've got an expansion bottle and you have to fill this up as well. So this is filled up to the full level. Simple as that, and that's just a case of pouring it in. Good enough, good enough. Bear in mind, it is a bit warm now, so it doesn't hurt that it's a tiny bit more. We're nearly there. Pop the bung back on that. And the final check. Get the bike off the stand and lean it right over both sides. Just tip that, just to get that last little bit in the top of the radiator. On the side stand this time, so that this is again uppermost for the final little top up before we do a proper pressurization check. Let's check how far down that is. Again, that's dropped down below the matrix again already. Right, so there we are. That's coolant, Hayabusa. Same as doing the coolant on any sports bike, quite simply. In fact, any liquid cooled motorcycle engine, it's exactly the same principle. It says on the book, the handbook, it says 2.4 to 2.6 litres of water in the coolant system, and that is just under 600 mils left. So literally that's exactly the right amount. And if you know you've used the right amount of your new stuff, you know you've got enough in there. Simple as that. Keep a check on your fluid. If you come around this side, you can keep a physical check on this. It's got to be at the full mark when it's cold. Okay, so if you stop the bike and it's up here, there's nothing wrong with that. That's expansion. That's why it's there. Keep checking it for leaks. Always be vigilant. Look underneath your bike. If you see a piece of fluid, nice dry garage floor, see a piece of fluid on the floor, just check it. Check what it is. If it's got that sweet smell, it's coolant, you've obviously got a bit of a leak. Being vigilant and looking after your bike is what it's all about. Prevents breakdowns and problems out on the road. So that's it. Coolant changed. Next job's the oil. But that's it for this one. Thanks for tuning in and watching Delboy's Garage. Always appreciate all the support. Take it easy, ride safe. Spring's coming. See you next time.